Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Growth Diary. And my guest today spent nearly 40 years at BDP, serving as chairman before becoming the UK's BIM ambassador for growth. So he's now consulting at Deploi. Richard Saxon, great to have you. Welcome.
Hello. Thanks.
So at the very beginning, you joined BDP fresh out of Liverpool University in the early 1960s and then stayed for nearly 40 years, 4 decades inside one organisation is quite something.
Well, first of all, it became my firm. Um, I was made a partner within 11 years of joining. And in that first period, I worked on a fabulous collection of buildings. So I was enjoying myself. And then it became my firm. But it's an amazing firm. It's global practice, it's engineers, architects, landscapers, interiors. It's in 10 or 15 locations. And so it wasn't as if I stayed in one place or did only one type of thing. I basically worked all over in Germany, Japan, Russia. And I was given sabbaticals to do bits of writing I wanted to do and did a couple of books that way. So it wasn't as if I was tied down in any way.
2011, you were appointed UK BIM ambassador for growth and helped persuade government to mandate building information, modelling information for public sectors, which was just an amazing achievement. So, what did that process look like from the inside?
Well, these things always start with enthusiasts, and the idea of BIM, which I'll call it for short, really swam into view with that name in about 2003. A group of activists, which included people in my firm, sort of worked on it and worked on the government. We did a building for Roche Pharmaceuticals, which came in under budget and under time, so much so that they had a cut off part of the brief that they didn't think they'd be able to afford. And they said, well, you saved us that money. We'll go back and build it now. And it seemed to be a perfect example of the sort of savings it could achieve. So what happened in the late 90s were a couple of studies on how the industry might be reformed. And the government appointed a chap called Paul Morell as their chief construction advisor in 2010 to steer them on how they might pick up on all of the things that these reports suggested. One of the things that came out of that was the idea of a BIM mandate for public sector building. It was announced in 2011 for a 2016 start, giving us 5 years to get used to the idea. And they formed a task group and a steering group, put me on the steering group. And they also asked me to do a research report called Growth Through BIM. Growth was the word then, it's as it is now. How will this increase the UK's GDP? And so I did that in 2013. And I would say that the top flight of consultancy and contracting firms were very ready for it. Most notable contractor was Lang O'Rourke, who dived right in and started to do things that others simply couldn't do. The Cheese Grater building in the City of London is probably the first example of that, where Lang O'Rourke had a BIM model made of the design and really to check the consultant's design. And then they made it from pieces prefabricated off site, which all fitted with no surprises when they arrived, which was one of the things that happened. And so that was their proof of concept. It was all done very quickly by comparison with what it would have cost to build it conventionally. So that's how it got going. So by 2016, everybody should have been ready. Of course, they weren't. But it was good. It was a rolling start.
At Deploi, and that was founded to essentially help architects and construction clients transition into using digital methodology. So 10 years on, how far has the industry actually come? How far does it still have to go, do you think?
Well, they do surveys each year of how far the industry thinks it's using digital working methods. And that's a broader category than just BIM, but nevertheless, everybody claims to be using it. Well, I say everybody, it's more than 75%. But these are self-declared results. And when you actually look at what they're doing, they're almost all using just parts of it. And this is quite frustrating, really, because they're not getting the most out of it and the customers are not getting the most out of it. But equally, the concept of what digitally aided construction is has evolved considerably during that period. It's become a much more sophisticated idea. It's been relabeled information management. Now we've got the Internet of Things and we've got artificial intelligence and we've got digital twins and all sorts of other ideas which are all linked, but the majority of people are only up to their ankles. They're not really in the water yet.
And you've said the biggest bottleneck is building owners and not necessarily architects or contractors. Why is that so persistent? What does it cost them when they don't engage?
Yes, well, you see, it's very difficult to demonstrate what it costs them, but they do appear to think it's something that designers and contractors do, but that they can just sit back and let it happen, which is missing the point, really, because the idea is to provide them with information which will enable them to make better decisions. So what information is it that they need? Oh, well, that will involve a bit of thought. We haven't had time for that bit of thought. It is rather an extraordinary situation that when you ask the client what they need, they basically say, nobody's ever asked us that question before. We need a building that satisfies our requirements. Yes, but what does that mean for each stakeholder? And in terms of what evidence at what points? Because that's really the basis then on which the team produces that stuff, not just a pile of drawing, but a comprehensive piece of information that meets all those stakeholder requirements so that they have every reason to make the decision, go or no go or alter it a bit quickly. Because again, clients hover about when they receive each report as the project proceeds. Do we like it? Don't we like it? Is it okay? If they'd been clearer about what would satisfy them, then they would get much quicker progress and everybody would just keep rolling.
Looking at Grenfell, Grenfell obviously a tragedy. We all know what happened there, and that in turn accelerated what's called the golden thread requirement. So that's a lifelong record for every building. How has that shifted Deploy's work, and what does it mean for owners who've never really had to think in that way previously?
Well, this has really been an enormous shot in the arm for information management because the separation between the people who build a project and the people who then take it on and run it has been enormous. Most buildings, even for the same organization, is a completely different team, runs it when it's a building project from the ones that run it when it's an asset that's being used. And that silo breakdown has had to be softened and melted. And we're getting quite a lot of, say, housing associations, for example, who build stuff and then have to take it on for its life. What do they need if they're going to do the golden thread, if they're going to know exactly how that building is made and be able to keep it up, keep that information base going? That's an enormous fillip to this whole idea. You may have heard that there are problems in getting through building regulations now. I think they've created two gateways. One, to actually show that the building will pass the gateway. And secondly, that it is built exactly like that and therefore can be allowed to start being used. And those are both tests of the quality of the information. So that's really jacking things up. It's slowing building down at this point, but the speed of those gateways is gradually improving. But it will mean that we do have real replicas, digital replicas of buildings, so that we can manage them successfully.
You mentioned in our previous call that approximately 20% of all construction spend goes on fixing errors, and the AI-powered site scanning is already helping close that gap between comparing what was built against what's planned overnight, essentially. So where do you feel that now AI genuinely transforms construction?
Well, that scanning example is something which has been a quick win because rather like Hawkeye on a tennis court, you can actually build a model in real time, instantaneously, of the work that's being done each day and compare it to what the model says should have happened that day. That's a really good quick win. There's a lot of when contractors have good records and know how they normally do things digitally, then they can get tremendous increase in insight as to how to overcome errors and gaps and make sure they don't lose time. But the reduction in errors is probably the biggest single way in which they can increase profit. There's a lot of hype, however. There's hype over imagery and the ability to generate images of future buildings. It's pointless, as is the idea that you can automate the design process. You can automate things that make it less labor intensive, but not the actual creative process. There are some modular building types, however, that can be put together on a configurator, rather like if you buy a kitchen from IKEA or even a car these days where you get a thing on screen and you decide what features you want and they build it to suit. So there's some progress of that sort, and you could probably design a school now based on a configurator because schools are made of predictable parts. So, yeah, it's coming and it's coming quite quickly, but there is a tremendous amount of hype.
Mm. It certainly is. After decades of championing digital construction, pretty much every level, the industry still lags though. So what keeps you going, or what would you actually suggest as a step change?
Well, yes, it's a long time. It's 25 years since I got a CBE for services to architecture and construction, which was because I'd been working for the previous 10 years on industry reform. So it is slow, but small steps can be very rewarding. Um, and the fact that the industry has taken so long means that it's been spared from the job losses that might have otherwise taken place. But on the other hand, it's not attracting recruits. The young want modern indoor digitally based working. They don't want paper based outdoor work. And step changes are possible where the clients build a program of projects rather than constantly changing teams, where clients learn from project to project and have a relationship based approach to who they work with. Japan is probably the most civilized place on the planet for the construction industries. They make so much money that they can afford to innovate. They have large R&D departments, and all of that's based on stable client designer contractor relationships, which seem to be anathema over here. My old firm BDP is now owned by Japanese, and we have really that mindset. We've always had that mindset. Probably that's one of the reasons we ended up there.
You've got 60 years of patent recognition on this industry. So what does the built environment look like 10 years now, if everything goes well? And what does it look like if the industry carries on what it's always done?
I think the answer to that is it will do both. The parts of the industry will be transformed and parts of the industry won't be. We have a 700 billion program of infrastructure work to re-equip the country with transport and energy and housing. We have the net zero and circular economy challenges where we've got to build very differently to the way we always did. We've got to look after all of the huge stock of buildings that we've got, not just concentrate on the new ones. The good outfits are going to rise to that opportunity and they're going to use digitally assisted working methods to attract the young people who otherwise wouldn't be in the industry. So those that rise to it are going to have a good time in the next decade. Those that don't are going to run out of people because they won't have the ability to attract them and they won't have the capacity and their costs will rise, so the demand for them will fall. But we're always going to have this enormous spread. You know, at one end, we're still going to have people repairing thatch roof on cottages and other people doing three-dimensionally printed buildings. It's going to be it's the biggest industry in the country. It's what people just don't realize, that it's nearly 20% of our gross domestic product is on the whole business of creating and operating buildings and buying and selling them as well. It's so big, it's invisible. It's like this the elephant that you can't really see because you're too close to it.
Richard, 6 decades inside the industry gives you a tremendous perspective that very few people can match. And that's a genuinely brilliant conversation. So thank you so much for joining us today. I wish you all the best.
Nice talking to you, Keith.
Thank you so much.